We'll go ahead and get started. We've got Josh in Buffalo, New York.
Hello.
Hey, you're on with Matt, Tracy, and Chris. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing pretty well.
That's good. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to ask why you don't believe
in what?
In God.
Who wants to take it? Tracy, why don't you believe in God?
Well, for me, a lot of the things that I was taught when I was younger started to unravel when I started doing more research into it. I spent about 10 years kind of looking at it once the origins of the Bible started falling apart for me, and I started learning more about that. That's when Christianity sort of bit the dust. And then about 10 years later, I had spent that time talking to people about their ideas about God, trying to figure out what it was I believed, because my initial childhood beliefs I'd been taught didn't hold up. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I couldn't really find a good explanation for why I would believe that there's something beyond the things in reality that I actually come into contact with and experience, like that concept that there's something more to it that I'm not perceiving, or that is imperceptible but at work, or the ways that it was being perceived are actually the same as not perceiving something. Yeah. Like the idea of answered prayer, for example, the idea that something happens that is or isn't what I want, because either way they say God is answered, sometimes he says no. So I started to actually realize that the things that I was interpreting as God were no different than a universe without a God, and ultimately I couldn't find a reason to say that there is something beyond the universe.
Yeah, for me, all the various God propositions I've heard have failed to meet their burden of proof. There isn't sufficient evidence for them. The arguments presented for them are either fallacious or clearly fallacious, or aren't supported by facts about reality. I didn't know. You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I've never believed in God. I've always been an atheist, raised in a secular household, and so I was never convinced. Any of the arguments that I heard never convinced me to start believing in a God.
Josh?
Okay.
Go ahead, Josh.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. So, but, I mean, wouldn't you say that we all have beliefs that we can't justify, like,
sure,
on a deep level?
Sure, but the question is, should we have those beliefs?
Right. If you become aware of them, should you keep them?
Okay. No, like I'm talking about like claims that just can't be justified, not like the irrationality of humans, but just like the philosophical process. Like,
well, if you understand that a claim does not, and I won't say can't, because I don't want to go down the road and pretend that we can always determine whether or not something could be demonstrated. But if there's a claim and you recognize simultaneously that there currently isn't sufficient evidence to warrant it, and you accept that it's true, you are by definition being irrational.
Well, okay, but there are like claims like other minds existing, like the past existing, like
so there's evidence there's evidence for those, and while there may be problems, it's just pragmatic that I accept that. So here you could look at it as Occam's razor or the null hypothesis, however you want to view it. Is it possible, or is it not? Is it the case that I can't demonstrate that the universe didn't start 2 seconds ago and that I'm in fact the only mind? I can't demonstrate that. However, if I act on that, if I act as if I'm in the Matrix, or my memories are fictitious or whatever, what does that benefit me? I'm stuck dealing with the world that I actually experience, whether it's the real world or not, or anything along those lines.
Well, I would just like to add, though, what you're talking about is a situation where even if you took it as contingent, right? Like, let's say I accept, I can't really know that this is in fact true. But it is what I'm presented with. Would you agree with that? It's what I'm presented with. Now, wait, whether it's justifiable or not, it is what I am presented with. Like, I have this situation where it seems as though I have memories, whether or not those memories... Okay.
Exactly.
But when
I would say the exact same thing about my God.
Okay, but here's the problem. You have to let me finish. I am not presented with a God. So when I'm saying I believe a God, what I'm saying is I'm actually inventing a belief in something which is not presented to me, that I am assuming is there despite the fact that there's no presentation.
Right. I'm not. So yeah. So for you, that wouldn't work, right? Like,
okay.
Like if
why
somebody
why
didn't
is it different for you?
Okay, because I actually do experience a God in that kind of way you're talking about.
What can you tell us what you mean by experiencing God and how you determined that it's a God?
Like the same thing I already kind of talked about, right? Like can you please explain to me how you know the world didn't come into being 5 seconds ago, and what evidence you have?
Josh, that's not an experience of God. That's a question about whether or not you can demonstrate a solution to hard solipsism. You said you experience a God. I want to know what you mean by experience a God and how you determine that it's a God that you're experiencing.
Okay. Like I've already kind of explained, but like
actually, you haven't remotely come close to giving anything that would be, here is what I mean by I experience God. What do you mean by it?
Like I just have a sense of it, a feeling of it. I know that's not going to be convincing, and there's going to be problems with that, and that was my point for calling.
Sure, but I would like to know. Okay, so you have some sense that you, for whatever reason, can't describe and won't think will be convincing. What is it about this sense that convinces you that it's a God, and do you think that that should convince the rest of us?
No. I'm only talking about the rationality of specific religious beliefs for some people, just like you directly perceive the world being real, and it's, you said pragmatic, things like that. I feel like I can say the same kind of thing about my God.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Here's the thing. You and I, just the two of us, we're the only ones here. Yeah. We both experience reality, correct?
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Okay, I guess. Something's real, okay.
You and I, are you convinced that you share the same reality that I do? That we exist and can communicate, we're both real within this reality?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we both have this shared belief.
Yeah.
Only one of us is claiming to have experience of God.
Uh-huh.
And your experience of God is, the closest you've come is just saying it's a feeling.
Yeah.
Okay. What makes you think that feeling is a God and not just a feeling?
What makes me think that, like the same, I don't know, like I'm not trying to make you angry, but it's the same kind of thing. I know, but you probably will be if I continue. Like, this the same sort of thing where you can't justify your senses being real, but you just kind of work as if they are, and you can't justify it to anyone else. But
do you care if your beliefs are true?
Yes.
So if you became convinced of something, wouldn't you want to actually explore to find out as best you could whether or not it's true?
Yes.
So how is it that you have explored your feeling of God to confirm that it is in fact God, or that you have a good reason to think that there's a God?
Well, I'm kind of admitting that there isn't a good reason for other people, but I'm saying, like...
I'm asking about you.
Yeah, for me, it's just a properly basic belief that I just...
Okay, then, so just for everybody who's watching, saying that God is a properly basic belief basically is an admission that it's unjustifiable, but you're going to believe it anyway. It doesn't actually offer anything to confirm it, and you might as well have just said, this is what I think, I can't prove it, and what kind of conversation could we possibly have about that?
But you admit we all have beliefs like that.
No, I think it's disingenuous to compare the two, because when you have actual experiences of memories, I can give great details of the experience of memories that I have. I will totally acknowledge that I can't know whether those memories existed 10 years ago or 2 seconds ago, but I have them, and I can describe them to you in great detail, and I can actually be hooked up to, neurologically, to be able to show that I am thinking and having memories. But what we're talking about on when you use God, you're saying that despite the fact that you are not presented with something, right? Because you can't even describe it, and you're saying that it's a feeling. We all have feelings. I don't want to bore you with
the story of my religious experience. That wasn't really my point for calling.
But if you're going to say that you are similarly, I love the frozen graphic. If you are going to say that you are similarly comparing this to something that a person is, like, I'm confronted with it, and the question is, should I reject what I'm confronted with? That's what you're saying, is why wouldn't you reject the only thing that you're confronted with, even though there's no other options available to me? But with this, what you've described so far with God is basically moving toward a belief in something that you are not necessarily confronted with in a way that you have to then opt to deny, at least not from what you've described.
No, for me, my feeling of God is as real as that of the real world.
Right, but having what is a feeling of God?
What does that mean?
What is a sense of the real world? I don't know.
Here's a sense of the real world. Like, if I punch this book really hard, I could break a finger and that would hurt a lot. That's a sense of the real world. I'm not saying that I know. What I'm saying is that it's an experience of which I have no alternative options to reach for as an explanation. It's like it feels like pain, and I'm experiencing pain, and I know it's pain, but I'm not saying it's pain put there by God. You're saying you have this feeling. Okay, you have a feeling. I believe you, but you're saying this feeling is God, and Matt is asking, how have you come to that conclusion?
And the thing here is, here's a DVD. Is this a DVD, Tracy?
Yeah.
Is this a DVD?
It is.
So now we have independent confirmation from 3 people that we are apparently experiencing the same thing, and we can describe it in amazing detail. Is it wrapped in plastic?
Yes.
With a cardboard cover? And does it have a picture of what appears to be Chris standing out maybe at White Sands? And then is that AC Grayling? Mm-hmm. See, this is the way we go about investigating to make sure we are not in fact delusional. How can you do that? That with your God feeling?
Okay. So implicitly there, or explicitly, you're assuming that those other people you're talking to are actually real and independent observers.
Josh, we already acknowledged we are stuck dealing with reality. Are you denying that me and Tracy and Chris are real?
Am I denying that?
Why did you call us?
No.
Right? I mean,
it's okay. So then let's drop the absurdities of saying, well, you can't even prove you're real. What you're doing is arguing that a lack of absolute certainty means that everything becomes a faith-based position and it's all equally improbable or improvable. And that is simply not true. The fact that we have, for example, are you looking at the screen?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, do you believe that myself, Tracy, and Chris are sitting here doing a show and talking to you over a telephone line?
Yes.
Okay. Do you also believe that there's a unicorn in the room with us?
Maybe. I don't know. I can't see. Maybe you have like a little stuffed animal or something there. I don't know.
I mean a real, live, living, breathing, loves virgins unicorn.
No.
Why not?
Well, yeah, because based on my experience of the world, I don't think something like that is very likely.
Okay. What if I told you I had a feeling that I called unicorn? Would that convince you?
If you no, that wouldn't convince me.
All right. Now let me finish. Let me finish the question. The fact that I have a feeling that that I'm calling unicorn here, should that be sufficient to convince me that there's a unicorn here?
I guess it kind of depends on that feeling. You're taking something that's just like a material kind of thing, and it's not like God in the same way.
Now, it doesn't matter if it's like God, Josh. This is about the primacy of experience. And if you're going to argue that because you have a feeling that you identify as God, that you are therefore justified in accepting that there is a God, then your argument means that any feeling that you have, you are justified.
Well, it's be like saying that I feel like my spouse is unfaithful, and whether he is or not, because I feel like they're cheating on me, they are. I wouldn't believe that.
That's not the way we verify reality.
Expanding from your properly basic beliefs. So, like, the feeling that your spouse is cheating on you isn't a properly basic belief. It's something that's
okay. I don't think that the belief in God is a properly basic belief. As a matter of fact, I think the mistake you're making is taking the limited set of. We should have as few properly basic beliefs as are necessary.
Right.
If we're going to have any.
Is that a properly basic belief?
We're done.
I just want to add one thing. My point wasn't to say that whether or not my spouse is cheating would be a properly basic belief. My point was to say that a feeling is not justification for something, for accepting something as reality. I don't accept memories as reality because I have a feeling that there are memories, but I can't really
we also know how flawed
access
memories
them.
are.
It's that the memories are actually there, and they hit me, and it's like I can think back and remember things. And whether that is what it seems to me to be or not is an irrelevancy, because I have no other options to pull from. But I'm not sitting here saying I don't have access to the memories, but I feel like there's memories.
And we also know that memory is unreliable, that it's manipulated, and everything else. But just for the other callers, out of respect for the audience and those of us here, if we've already acknowledged that there's no way, we don't have a solution to the problem of hard solipsism, which most people that I'm talking to probably don't care about or understand. If you start going down the parade of how do you know that, how do you know that, how do you know that, especially after we've already explained that what you're doing is trying to make an argument that in a world where you don't have absolute certainty, everything is suspect, in order to imply that it's all equally suspect, when we are doing our best to talk about how we would distinguish between reality and a delusion, I'm going to hang up on you. It's a guarantee. The conversation will be over there, because this parade of, well, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that? Has already been acknowledged. And of the four of us, the three here and Josh on the phone, three of us are talking about reality as we experience. We're talking about ways in which we can investigate to determine whether or not our beliefs are reasonable. And one of us is asserting that they have a feeling which they're going to call God, which they acknowledge they can't justify, and that somehow this is fine just because somebody else can't justify some other belief.
Right. And there's a big difference between saying I'm accepting this DVD that I'm holding, and here it is, and I'm going to accept what's presented to me and not reject it because I have no alternative but to accept that I'm holding it in my hands. Now, there might be something else going on, but I have no access to that something else, and so this is what I'm left with. The difference would be, let's say that this isn't here, and I'm saying I believe there is a DVD sitting here because I have this feeling that there's a DVD. That is accepting something that you're not presented with, and basically saying that because you feel like a DVD is there, that you're going to accept that even though you're not presented with that in a way that you would have to actually reject what you're experiencing in order to
And as a closer for this, for Josh and the other people who fall into this particular trap, they will say, yes, but God is a different type of thing than the DVD. Okay, fine. You believe that there's a God, and you are going to exercise reason and good standards of evidence for determining everything else about reality, but you're going to put God in this special category. If God has put himself in a category that defies reasonable investigation, then not only do we have good warrant to not accept that he exists, but you're admitting that you cannot have good warrant to accept that he exists. It's not the fault of reason or science that it can't investigate the supernatural, that we can't confirm that your God exists. But if you're going to call in to specifically admit that you can't demonstrate that God exists, but that you feel personally justified because you feel it, and this isn't something that anybody can investigate or confirm, you're basically calling in to acknowledge to the world that you have no good reason for your belief, but you're sticking with it anyway. And I reject the notion that people who do that honestly care about whether or not their beliefs are true, no matter how much they claim that they do.
Yeah, and just to say, like from a communication standpoint, feelings are not, they don't really give us information about the outside world. They're simply an interpretation. They're a personal interpretation of what's going on around us. So your feelings come from your own brain, and it's just your internal, it's you talking to yourself. It's not really giving you information. A feeling of fear may or may not be justified. If I fear for my life, I think Chris is going to murder me after the show or something, that might be completely unjustified. The fact that I feel it isn't telling me anything about Chris or what Chris plans to do after the show. It's simply about my own interpretation of something, whatever has caused me to be afraid and whatever has caused me to think that, someone's going to do something like that. But that feeling doesn't inform me about external reality. It's just an internal response that I'm giving myself.
Your beliefs, what you believe about something is independent of the facts about that something. And what we're talking about is do we have good reason to believe that your feelings about the facts are accurate, that your internal model of reality matches reality? And what you're saying is, it doesn't seem to matter whether it matches reality because we can't prove that there is a reality, and therefore all feelings about, deities or whatever are justified. And by the way, if you follow Josh's thing down the path, anybody who is convinced that they experience another God, some God other than Josh's, they have to be considered justified as well. And so now you have multiple people who are apparently under Josh's model justified in believing things which we know they can't all be true. The God concepts are in conflict, so they cannot all be true, but they could all be false.